The HOA rolled out a new parking layout for the neighborhood last week. At first, I didn't think much of it until I looked closer and saw something shocking. My house wasn't on the map. Where it should have been was now a numbered zone, marked for visitor parking. Within 48 hours, I got slapped with a citation for parking in an unauthorized spot. That spot? My own driveway. I had a feeling something shady was going on, so I reviewed footage from the security camera in the lobby. What I saw confirmed every suspicion I had. If you've ever caught something similar on camera, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Also, let me know where you're watching from. I'm curious to see how many of you have dealt with neighbors like mine. I'm Joel Winters, 35 years old, and I work as a civil engineer. That's important because my job revolves around building codes and regulations, so I understand that rules matter. I had just purchased what I believed was my dream home in a quiet suburb outside Denver. Everything seemed ideal until I met my neighbor. From that point forward, my peaceful life unraveled quickly. The house was a classic two-story colonial with a big driveway, mature trees, and neighbors who seemed pleasant during the initial walkthrough. I should have realized then that it was too perfect. In hindsight, I wonder if the previous owners sold because of what I was about to uncover. Maybe they even tried to warn me in subtle ways I didn't notice. The realtor kept emphasizing how quiet the neighborhood was, and now I think she meant it in a very different way. On my first day at the new place, while unloading boxes from my truck, I noticed a woman staring at me from her window. Not just a glance, she was full-on watching me like I was a circus act. She looked to be in her 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a look that screamed judgment. I figured she was just curious, so I waved. She immediately vanished from the window. A bit strange, but I brushed it off. I had more important things to do than worry about a nosy neighbor. Or so I thought. Had I known what was coming, I might have packed my boxes right back into the truck. You know how it is when you're thrilled about something new. You ignore red flags because you want things to go well. That blind optimism ended up costing me 3 months of total misery. The real chaos began on day 2. I came home from work around 6:30 p.m. and saw a silver Honda Civic parked directly in front of my driveway, not near it, but completely blocking the entrance. I stayed in my truck, staring at the car, thinking maybe it was some kind of emergency. But no, I saw the driver inside casually scrolling on her phone like it was no big deal. I parked on the street and walked over, trying to be polite. "Excuse me," I said. "Would you mind moving your car? You're blocking my driveway." The woman lowered her window, and to my surprise, it was the same lady from the window. "Oh, sorry. I didn't even notice," she said with a look of innocent surprise. But the smirk on her face said something entirely different. "What are you going to do about it?" I stood there, not angry, just baffled. She moved her car, but the whole interaction felt like a test. I told myself maybe she just had a rough day or honestly hadn't realized what she was doing. Everyone makes mistakes, right? But over the next few days, her behavior grew even more bizarre. She'd park at weird angles, leave her door open while unloading groceries, and blast her radio so loudly I could hear it from inside my house. Every time I asked her to move, she acted apologetic, but that smirk never left her face. By day 5, I started questioning my own sanity. Was I being paranoid, or was she actually messing with me? That answer came soon enough. Day 7, I had an important client call. I was running late and needed to leave quickly. But Diane, yes, I had learned her name by then, had parked her car sideways across my entire driveway. Not angled. Not close. Sideways, like a barricade. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes honking gently before she finally came outside, feigning confusion. "Oh my goodness, am I in your way?" I barely made the call, and I could tell the client noticed my flustered state. That's when I realized this wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. That evening, I knocked on her door and said, "Diane, this is the 7th time you've blocked my driveway this week. Could you please be more mindful?" Her demeanor instantly changed. The sweetness vanished. "You clearly don't understand how things work around here," she snapped. "I suggest you start learning." I blinked. "Actually, I do understand. I read codes and regulations for a living." Her eyes narrowed, but she just smiled coldly. "We'll see about that." She pointed her phone at my car, took 3 photos of the license plate, and made a call. "Yes, he's here. Same truck, same mailbox." "I'm sending the photos now." I stood there speechless. She was documenting me like I was a criminal. But the real shock came later that night. I checked my email and found one that made my blood boil. Diane had accidentally sent me a message intended for someone else, Martin Pike, the HOA president. It read, "This new resident is insane, always demanding the most ridiculous things. These amateur troublemakers have no clue who they're dealing with." I read it over and over, hands shaking with fury. That's how she saw me, and probably anyone else who questioned her. I printed the email and sat with it, debating whether to confront her or hold on to it as ammunition. The next morning, I received my first official violation. Not for the lawn, not for trash cans. For the security camera she had clearly noticed. The day before. As an engineer, I approached the situation logically. If she wanted to play with rules, I'd beat her at her own game. I started collecting evidence like I would on a project. Data, documentation, strategy. I began chatting with Mr. Peterson, my elderly neighbor on the other side. He had lived there 20 years and knew everyone. Turns out, Diane had run 3 families out of the neighborhood in the past 2 years. "She has her ways," he said, shaking his head. I nearly choked. 3 families? He nodded. "She targets the new ones first. Tests how much they can handle. Most don't last." That hit me hard. I wasn't the first. I was just next in line. By the end of the week, she blocked my driveway 3 more times. Once, she left her SUV idling, hazard lights on, and walked away. A garbage truck honked for 8 minutes before giving up. So, I installed a security camera legally, facing only my property and the street. Then I downloaded every page of the HOA bylaws and studied them. Like blueprints. I created spreadsheets, cross-referenced policies, and documented every infraction with photos and notes. Then, buried deep in Section 7.3, I found something useful. No vehicle can remain parked in the same spot over 24 consecutive hours without the proper signage. Diane had broken this rule 12 times in 2 weeks. Each violation carried a $500 fine. That's $6,000 in potential penalties. But I doubted enforcement would be that simple. After all, Diane had scared off multiple families already. Clearly, the HOA wasn't known for applying its own rules fairly. She started parking in ways that didn't fully block my driveway, but made backing out nearly impossible. Every time I tried to leave, she'd magically appear outside watering plants or grabbing mail, forcing me to wait. It was psychological warfare disguised as routine behavior. Then I discovered a file on the HOA complaint board that still contained metadata, created by Din Mapleton Han-Net. She hadn't even removed her name. Mr. Peterson confirmed she had done the same thing to a family on Oak Street. Started with parking, then noise complaints, then nitpicking violations until they sold. At a loss just to get away. "She doesn't make mistakes," he said. "Every move is calculated." At that point, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a difficult neighbor. Diane had perfected harassment. I compiled my case file, 12 rule violations, photos, timestamps, parking, angles, safety concerns, previous complaints, HOA procedures. It was airtight. But I kept wondering, if 3 families couldn't beat her, what made me different? Was I being foolish? I laid out all my evidence and highlighted her name on that. Email. Then I found something in the HOA charter on page 11, hidden between lawn rules and mailbox specs. Board members could amend enforcement processes with a 2/3 vote. No public notice required. I spent the weekend writing a bulletproof complaint. 12 pages of violations, timelines, photos, citations. I submitted it Monday. 3 days later, I got a certified letter. My hand shook as I opened it. Violation notice. $1,000 fine for unauthorized surveillance equipment facing public property. Complaint filed by D. Rowley, board member. She used my own evidence against me. I pressed my hand so hard on the table that the wood left lines in my skin. I couldn't believe this was legal. Then came the HOA president's reply. Dear Mr. Carter, thank you for your concerns regarding parking. We encourage neighborly resolutions. We will review your submission accordingly. Translation: We're not doing anything. A week later, 2 police officers showed up at my door for an alleged trash receptacle violation. I walked them around my property, measuring the distance, perfectly legal. Someone's got it out for you, one of them muttered. This is ridiculous. The next day, another certified letter, a noise complaint. The equipment in question? My coffee grinder used for 30 seconds. Every morning at 7:15, she was trying to get me cited for making coffee. It was so absurd it was almost impressive. That afternoon, I saw her watering her flower beds with the smuggest smile I'd ever seen. Calling the police over trash cans, Diane? Really? Rules are rules, Joel. Just making sure everyone follows them. If she could manipulate me with phony police reports and $1,000 fines, what kind of leverage was she using behind the scenes with the board? How many of them had skeletons in their closets that Diane was using as blackmail? I dove into researching HOA governance, digging into oversight procedures, ways to remove board members, anything that might help me. But every route seemed blocked without either board consent or a supermajority vote from residents. And if 3 families had already packed up and left, how many people could I realistically count on? It hit me, trusting the system wasn't just useless, it was dangerous. Yet oddly, that thought also freed me. If the rules couldn't protect me, I'd have to outsmart them. I turned my attention to HOA law, hunting for loopholes, legal precedents, anything to give me a fighting chance. I looked into conflict of interest regulations, which Diane clearly violated by going after residents she had personal beef with. I examined removal policies and dug into prior cases of HOA abuse. I even researched the board members' personal histories to understand how Diane might be holding them in check. If I was going to stand a chance, I needed to understand exactly how the game was rigged. That night, I faced a decision. Cut my losses and move on, just like those 3 families before me, or stay and risk being the next one Diane tried to obliterate. As I stared at the mountain of research on my desk, I had a realization, maybe. I was the first person who had the right skills and sheer grit to push back. The others probably didn't know municipal codes or how to document violations. Maybe I could win where they couldn't. Or maybe I was about to find out why they left. That night, I submitted a request to the town archive for all HOA enforcement actions. The reply came 12 hours later. Diane had filed cases against 6 homes in the past 18 months. 4 of them were now vacant. I headed to the public library and asked for HOA meeting records. The clerk handed me a cardboard box with a shrug. "You're not the first to ask," she said. Inside, I saw the same names over and over: Peterson, Alvarez, Lynn, fined, complained, gone. I knew then I couldn't fight her alone. Diane had the HO and machine backing her and some unknown leverage over the board. But maybe, just maybe, there were others who'd been targeted and were ready to stand up. My first real lead came by pure accident when I ran into Amber Shaw at the grocery store. She was wrangling 2 kids and dropping papers. I helped her pick them up and saw they were HOA violation letters. "Tough week with the HOA?" I asked, keeping it casual. Her face twisted into a tired mix of anger and defeat. "You could say that," she replied. "My neighbor reported me for unsafe living conditions because my kids were too noisy. The city found nothing wrong, but I still had to pay $800 in inspection fees." My stomach dropped. "Did you say your neighbor reported you? What was their name?" I already knew. "Diane Rowley," she said. I nodded. "Oh yeah, I know her." I told Amber my story, and the frustration in her eyes lit up into a spark of something more hope and resolve. Right there in the aisle, 2 strangers united over a shared nightmare. Turns out, Amber's a school teacher, smart, detailed, and had her own stack of documented harassment. Between us, we had a mountain of evidence. It was the first time I truly felt like I wasn't losing my mind. Between Peterson and Amber, I began piecing together what could only be described as Diane's neighborhood warpath. One family on Maple Street had to repaint their home because Diane claimed their color scheme wasn't allowed, even though it was. An elderly neighbor was fined for excessive decorations, 3 garden gnomes that had been there 5 years. College students on Pine Avenue were harassed for parking violations until they broke their lease and left. When I saw that 3 violations were for wind chimes, I realized this wasn't about community standards, it was about applying constant pressure. You hear horror stories about HOAs online, but living through one feels like a bureaucratic nightmare come to life. Then Peterson dropped another bomb. "Martin Pike used to push back when Diane joined the board," he told me, "but now she's got dirt on everyone, money issues, shady contracts, personal stuff. He's scared." That explained the robotic email I'd received from Martin. He wasn't incompetent. He was compromised. Diane had hijacked the HOA using a combo of fear, manipulation, and bureaucracy. One document stood out. It had a revision date from 6 months ago, but no signature, no meeting notes, just a change. Clause C4 now included a line that allowed fines without warnings. It hit me. She was running a surveillance operation under the guise of rule enforcement. I wasn't sure whether to be terrified or weirdly impressed. I ran into Peterson at the mailboxes. He glanced at the folder in my hand and smirked. "She get you yet?" he asked. 5 violations, I said. He nodded, starter pack, and walked away. Amber and I formed what we dubbed the Concerned Residents Group, basically anyone brave enough to stand up to Diane's power trip. I handled the legal and bureaucratic side. Amber brought trust, being a teacher and longtime resident. Peterson gave us history and credibility. Our goal was simple: demand transparency and fair rule enforcement. We planned a special HOA meeting to confront what we called systemic abuse, unequal rule enforcement, lack of accountability, and shady complaint processes. I started assembling what I privately called the Diane Files: 47 frivolous complaints in 18 months, selective enforcement based on personal vendettas, suspicious contracts, pattern harassment. It was overwhelming, 3 of us against the entire OA machine. Were we fearless or just naive? Then I got home and found a note taped to my gate. No name, just a bolded line: "You are destabilizing our peaceful community." At the meeting, Diane stood with her sharp voice and commanding presence. "We're here to discuss a threat to our neighborhood's harmony," she said, staring right at me. Word had gotten back to her, and her retaliation was swift and brutal. Her mission: destroy my credibility before I could organize anyone against her. 3 days before the meeting, I got a certified letter that made my earlier fine look like pocket change. Diane had submitted doctored footage to the board showing me walking toward an elderly woman completely muted, edited to remove her voice and my calm demeanor. Out of context, it made me look like I was harassing her. Martin Pike called that Friday. "Joel, I'll be honest," he said, voice heavy with fatigue. "Some board members think you're unstable. There's talk of harassment charges. Maybe step back from all this." I hung up in disbelief. Not only was Diane being protected, they were turning me into the villain. The video was so convincing that I started doubting myself. Had I crossed a line? Was I losing it? The self-doubt was suffocating exactly her plan. I sat up at 2 a.m., surrounded by my files, seriously considering torching it all and leaving. Maybe I had become obsessed. Maybe I should walk away before I wrecked everything. In that moment of despair, I called Peterson. My voice trembled. "Maybe I should stop," I said. "They think I'm dangerous. Maybe they're right." He replied calmly but firmly, "Joel, you know it's really happening. That's what matters. Don't let her break you. That's exactly what she wants." His words were a lifeline. He was right. This was psychological warfare. Knowing that didn't make it easier to fight, but it gave me the strength to try. After that, Diane got more subtle and somehow even more chilling. She posted my photo on the neighborhood bulletin under residents of concern, with a vague warning, "Use appropriate caution." No accusations, just poison in the form of suggestion. Suddenly, neighbors avoided me. Kids were pulled indoors when I passed. The isolation was brutal. All from one fake video and a flyer. Amber, visibly shaking at a meeting, asked, "Since when is lavender in your yard a violation?" Diane snapped, "This is not the time for personal complaints." But Amber stood her ground. Then why did everything become a violation the day Joel moved in? Even Amber started pulling back. "Joel, I have kids," she whispered. "If she can make you look dangerous, what happens to me?" I felt the last of my support slipping away. The pressure was relentless. Every trip outside felt like walking through a gauntlet of judgment. I was about to quit when I remembered something my engineering professor used to say: when you hit a wall, don't quit, find a different path. Fighting Diane head-on wasn't working. I needed to let her expose herself. I started researching the community center's security setup and learned that all public areas, including where board members chat during events, are continuously recorded. At the next meeting, I stood and said, "I'd like to present Exhibit A." I held up a printed email with Diane's full address and the subject line, "Enforcement Priority List." Beneath were our names, mine, Amber's, Peterson's. The room went still. Even the guy in sandals leaned forward. I realized I'd been playing checkers while Diane played chess. But I wasn't just a player, I was an engineer. I don't just play systems. I build them. And I was about to build one that would reveal everything Diane had done. She didn't even deny it. She just smiled. "You're walking a tightrope," she warned. But by then, I had already sent the documents to every single resident on the HOA mailing list. After weeks of delays filled with red tape and obvious attempts to stall, our emergency HOA meeting finally took place on a Thursday evening at the community center. The room was packed wall to wall. Word had spread about the neighborhood conflict, and people showed up eager to see how things would unfold. The tension hit me the moment I stepped inside. Some residents met my eyes with empathy, while others looked at me like the troublemaker Diane had spent weeks portraying me to be. Amber arrived with her own folder full of evidence. Peterson showed up with several of the longer-tenured residents. The full HOA board was seated at the front, visibly uncomfortable and clearly wishing they were anywhere else. The atmosphere was charged, as if everyone sensed a major shift was coming. I approached my presentation the way I would any engineering project, structured, methodical, and without emotion. I laid out 12 documented parking violations, complete with photos and timestamps. I provided evidence of biased rule enforcement targeting multiple families, statements from Amber and Peterson about repeated harassment, and a timeline detailing how complaints escalated against anyone who dared question Diane's authority. I spoke in an even professional tone, relying on facts instead of emotion. For 20 minutes, I presented a case that should have been impossible to refute. As I finished, a hush fell over the room. I noticed residents nodding, whispering, scribbling notes. For a moment, I believed the truth was finally breaking through. Then Diane stood, clutching her laptop. I braced myself. She addressed the room with her signature insincere concern. "Before we waste more time on these baseless accusations," she said, "I think you should see who you're really dealing with." She played the doctored footage. The edited video made it appear as if I were threatening an elderly woman, and the mood in the room shifted instantly. Whispers turned to murmurs. Board members nodded along, and I felt the tide turning against me. After everything I'd compiled, after all that work, she was still managing to sway the crowd with a lie dressed up in carefully edited footage. Frustration built in my chest. How do you fight someone who fabricates reality? But I had prepared for this. I stood, heart racing but voice steady. "That's interesting, Diane. Before we jump to conclusions based on manipulated footage, I think everyone deserves to hear something else." I connected my phone to the community center's sound system and played an audio recording from the previous board meeting. Diane's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "Give the landscaping contract to my brother-in-law. Sure, it's $15,000 over the lowest bid, but these residents never read the financials anyway." Then Martin's voice. "What about the Joel situation?" "Diane, I'm handling it. One more incident and we can ban him from the facilities. Maybe even force a sale if we make life hard enough." The room fell silent. Shock rippled through the crowd. Suspicious glances toward me turned into glares directed at Diane. Her face drained of color. She stammered, "That recording is illegal. He hacked our system. It's inadmissible." I was ready. "Actually, Diane," I said coolly, "the community center cameras are public property. I submitted a formal request to access recordings from shared spaces. That right is guaranteed under HOA bylaws, section 12.4. The recording came from the lobby during the March board meeting." Diane had been so certain of her grip on everything that she never bothered to see what was being recorded. "You think a few papers scare me?" she scoffed. "You clearly don't understand what happens when people stop respecting the board." "Martin." Pike stood up. He looked pale. "I resigned from the board, effective immediately," he declared. "I was pressured into decisions that went against our responsibilities." 3 more board members exchanged whispers, their expressions panicked. You could feel the energy in the room shift. People realized this wasn't just a few bad rules, the whole structure had been corrupted. The emergency vote to remove Diane wasn't close. 9 in favor, 1 against, hers, and 2 abstentions from members trying to protect themselves. The new interim board wasted no time. They levied penalties. $6,000 for parking violations, $4,000 in restitution for the inflated contract, and $2,500 for misconduct. Total, $12,500. I turned the last page of a document and saw her signature at the bottom. 2 other signatures were next to hers or cousins, who had both resigned 2 weeks after signing. Her entire authority had been built on illusion, and everyone had fallen for it. The next morning, Amber sent me a picture. Someone had laminated 10 copies of my email printouts and posted them to the HOA bulletin board. Below them, in red marker, someone had written, We deserve a vote. The days that followed felt surreal. In week 1, a for sale sign appeared on Diane's lawn. By week 2, moving trucks arrived. By week 3, she was gone. No goodbye, no parting shot, just vanished. Ironically, she could no longer park in my driveway because she didn't live here anymore. But 2 days before her home sold, I found a manila envelope at my door. Inside were photocopies of 23 violation complaints she'd prepared but never filed. Everything from water runoff to mailbox placement. She had tracked every aspect of my property and life garden edges, trash cans, visitors, doormat color, and turned them into potential violations. If I hadn't fought back, those papers would have buried me. Strangely, those documents gave me a sense of peace. It hadn't just been about parking. It was about a person using bureaucracy as a weapon. By mid-afternoon, the community center was crowded with faces I'd never seen at meetings before. Diane showed up last, her calm demeanor unsettling. New board quickly put reforms in place. All meetings are now recorded. Minutes are published online within 48 hours. Residents can access complaint files through a simple portal. Contracts now require competitive bids. A hotline for reporting board misconduct was established. And my driveway finally received resident parking only signage, what I had wanted from the start. It's amazing how quickly things improve when one toxic person is removed. The neighborhood felt renewed. People spoke to each other again. Kids played freely. Relief was in the air. I hooked up my laptop to a projector. As Diane took her seat, I displayed the first slide. Her emails altered. Rules, fine timelines. The silence said everything. 3 months later, I sat on my porch, staring at my clean driveway, when the full weight of it all hit me. This battle had never been about fines or rules. It had been about someone who believed power exempted her from decency. Someone who thought she could control others for fun. Diane had tested me with parking. If I had backed down, she would have moved on to bigger things, noise complaints, property violations, eventually forcing me out. Just like the others, 4 months later, a young family moved into Diane's old house. Their kids rode bikes and played outside without fear of being watched or documented. That was the real victory. Amber and I still meet for coffee. You gave us our community back, she told me once. That meant more than any fine or vote. Knowing families could now live here in peace made everything worth it. Peterson once stood up at a meeting and said, "I move for a vote of no confidence." Seconded. Came a voice from behind. Hands went up one by one. Diane remained the only one not raising hers. 6 months later, I ran into her at a grocery store across town. We locked eyes for 3 seconds. She didn't speak. She didn't threaten. She just turned and walked away. She didn't need to say anything. We both knew exactly how it ended. Funny thing is, Diane inadvertently taught me something valuable. That peace is sometimes something you have to fight for. That the person obsessed with your driveway might really be after control of your whole life. And that standing up to one bully can keep many others safe. Bullies usually count on silence. They target people they think won't resist. Diane made one fatal mistake. She assumed I was like everyone else. But some of us were built to fix broken systems. And our neighborhood? It's better off now. So if you're dealing with someone like her, remember, document everything, rally your allies, and never let abuse hide behind the guise of neighborhood rules. Sometimes restoring peace means being willing to fight for it. That night, I passed the community bulletin. Someone had taped a new sheet over Diane's infamous rules. It was blank, except for one message written in bold black ink. This time, we start over. At QA Stories, we don't just tell stories. We let the chaos speak for itself. If this one shocked you, just wait until you see what comes next.